If you're listening to this and you're over 60, it is not an accident. This message is not entertainment. It is an appointment God allowed. While you were thinking your time had already passed, a decision was made in heaven to keep you here for a reason you still haven't understood. Today, we're going to step into that answer together. Stay until the end, because this revelation can change the way you see every single day you still have left on this earth. Look back for a moment. Remember the faces that are no longer here. Friends you laughed with, family you shared a table with, people who seemed stronger than you, younger than you, yet they left first. Remember the diagnoses where they told you that you might not make it. That night when the pain in your chest was so strong you thought that was the end. That accident that almost happened. That sadness no one ever knew you carried. And yet you opened your eyes one more time. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you this. Every sunrise you've had after turning 60 is a decision. Not yours, a decision from God. And today, you are not in front of this screen out of boredom or by some random algorithm. You are here because there are words you needed to hear before wasting even one more day, feeling like you don't matter. There is something I need you to understand from the beginning. You are not a leftover. You are not a miscalculation. You are not someone who just happened to stay while others left. If you are still here, it's because there is something in heaven still written with your name on it. Something that has not yet been fulfilled. Something God still wants to do with you, in you, and through you. And I want to ask you something from now. If while you listen to this, you feel even the smallest spark inside, if something in your heart says, "This is for me," don't leave. Don't save it for later. This might be one of those messages that marks a before and after in someone's life. Maybe in yours, because we're going to talk about wounds you never told anyone about silences you swallowed so you wouldn't worry others, about nights when you asked God to simply take you, and yet He didn't. He held you. He held you when you yourself didn't want to continue. And if God held you against your own desire to give up, it's because there is something much greater behind everything you've lived. I want you to remember one scene from your past, that specific moment when you thought, "My story ends here." Maybe it was in a hospital, when you heard the cold sound of the machines and the diagnosis you didn't want to hear. Maybe it was at a funeral, when you buried someone you thought you would bury much later. Maybe it was betrayal, financial loss, a phone call that shattered your heart. I want you to go there for a moment. Now ask yourself, why after that are you still here? It is not because you were stronger than everyone, not because you were healthier, not because you were better, not because you deserved it more. It is because God saw something in you that is not finished yet. And this message is part of that continuation. There are several reasons why God has kept you alive after 60. These are not cute phrases to comfort you. They are real assignments, and as we walk through them, you will find yourself in one or several of them. When that happens, don't ignore it. Don't say, "That's for someone else," because if your heart reacts, it's because heaven is underlining your name. First, I need you to understand something powerful. Your years are not a burden. They are your credential. Every gray hair, every wrinkle, every scar, every line on your face is a signature of time. You've gone through things entire generations can't even imagine. You've seen changes in the world, in family and society. You've seen plans, people, projects rise and fall. And you're still here. That does not make you extra. It makes you a witness. God has kept you alive because your story still has to speak. There is someone younger, maybe in your own home, who needs to hear not just your advice, but your scars. They need to know how you survived abandonment, how you survived poverty, how you found strength when it looked like there was none. And listen carefully. If you don't tell them, that person will walk in the dark on roads where you already bled. There are silences in you that can no longer remain silences. God has preserved you so that your testimony becomes a bridge, not a buried secret. But here comes something even deeper. You are not only alive to talk about the past. You are alive because there are prayers that came out of your mouth decades ago that are still in process. Think of all the times you talked alone, cried in your bed, stared at the ceiling, and said words no one heard, but heaven wrote down. Those pleas for your children, your home, your marriage, that loved one who was destroying themselves, that change you needed. Many of those prayers have not been forgotten. There are things you have not yet seen, not because God doesn't have them, but because God decided you would see them with your own eyes. He has kept you breathing because there are answers on the way, and He needs you present when they arrive. Not only to enjoy them, but to recognize, I asked for this years ago and God was faithful. And maybe you say, I've seen more losses than answers. I know. Pain pushed you to think there's nothing great ahead anymore. But listen, the fact that you are still here proves that God has not closed your book. When an author finishes a book, they put a period at the end. If you are breathing, that final period has not been written. There is another reason God has kept you alive, because there are things left unfinished. And I'm not only talking about projects, I'm talking about people. A conversation you never had, a forgiveness you never gave, a hug you always postponed, an apology you swallowed out of pride. That loose thread is not a small detail. It might be a central part of your purpose in this season. Maybe God is keeping you here to give you the chance to restore something only you can restore. Because there are words that only sound truly sincere coming from your mouth. There are wounds that only close if you decide to step closer. And that decision, as small as it seems, can change generations. I want you to listen to this calmly. Not everything in your life was fair. Not everything was right. Not everything you did was right. And still God protected you. Not because He approves of your mistakes, but because He decided to give you time to redirect your ending. This season is not punishment, it is opportunity. You can still decide what kind of mark you will leave when you're gone. Here is another truth. You are still here because someone is watching you, even if you think they're not. There are eyes on how you speak, how you react, whether you still give thanks or only complain, whether you still trust or gave up inside. The way you live these final years might be the strongest message someone ever receives in their whole life. It may be what draws them closer to God or what pushes them away. And God has kept you here because your life, now more than ever, preaches louder than your words. Maybe you never spoke on a stage, never held a microphone, but every gesture you make in this season is a message. When you decide to stay kind even when your body hurts, when you choose to forgive even when you have plenty of reasons to be bitter, when you keep believing despite your losses, that even if you don't see it is holding someone up. And that's why I want to ask one more thing. If up to this point you feel that part of this is true for you, stay until the end of this message. Because I still haven't spoken about the most intense reason, the one that can confront you and embrace you at the same time. There is something God has been trying to tell you for a long time, but noise, worries, and exhaustion haven't let you hear it clearly. Another reason you're alive after 60 is because there are people who still depend on your prayers. Maybe they don't ask you for advice anymore. Maybe you feel ignored. Maybe they don't call you as often. But your voice before God has a weight you can't imagine. There are battles your children, your grandchildren, and people close to you cannot win alone. And even if they don't know it, your secret words are a wall, a shield, a defense. Many times you've thought there's not much you can do anymore, that your strength isn't enough, that your body doesn't respond the same, that your mind gets tired faster. But listen, maybe you're no longer in the season of running, but you are in the season of sustaining. And some things are held up not by young muscles, but by hearts that kneel and talk with God, with the authority of a whole life lived. You are alive because there is a generation behind you that needs covering. And even if you feel you didn't achieve everything you wanted, your very presence, your silent intercession, your timely words can be the difference between someone getting lost and someone finding the way. You are also still here because there are promises over your life that have not yet been fully revealed. Words you once heard, something you felt deep inside, Dreams that seemed too big for your story. Maybe you thought they expired with your age. But God does not work by your calendar. If something came out of his mouth, he does not cancel it because of your years. 60, 70, 80 are not an obstacle to the plan that's still pending. There are people who were raised up in stages of life where others had already given up. People who found their true mission when the world told them it was time to sit down and wait. The same can happen with you, not in grand ideas searching for applause, but in specific steps only you can take. A phone call, a visit, a decision, a yes you never gave before. Now I want you to think of all the times danger brushed past you. That time a car almost hit you. That medicine that could have harmed you. That deep sadness no one saw when you thought about ending everything. Why didn't it happen? Because even when something tried to destroy you, there was a hand holding you. It wasn't you. It wasn't cold luck. It was protection. You're alive because your story is part of a battle bigger than you imagine. And your simple staying here is already a victory. But God doesn't want you to only survive. He wants you to understand why you were preserved so that you live intentionally with the days you have left. Listen closely to what comes next, because now this message stops being general and becomes a personal assignment. There are people connected to you who will only listen to certain truths if they come from your mouth. Children who will only open up with you. Grandchildren who respect your experience even if they seem not to listen. People quietly watching you. Your voice still has authority, but that authority awakens when you decide to use it with love, humility, and truth. God has kept you alive after 60, so you will be a guardian and a guide. Not to control, but to lovingly warn. Not to manipulate, but to walk alongside. Not to place guilt, but to point out the way. Maybe for years you stayed silent about important things out of fear of conflict or not knowing how to say them. But this season is different. In this stage, your sincerity can save destinies. One honest conversation can stop wrong decisions. One word from you can give direction to someone who is lost. And I know what you might be thinking. I was never a perfect example. With what face am I going to advise? Exactly because of that. Because you know what it means to fail. You know what it is to regret too late. You know what it is to carry the weight of wrong decisions. Your voice is valuable not because it comes from perfection, but because it comes from truth. And God uses that. That's why you're still here. Because someone still needs to hear your full version of the story. Not the edited one, the real one, with mistakes, hits, tears. And from there, show that even with all of that, God held you. Now, while you keep listening, I want to give you a very serious invitation. Do not turn this off. Don't leave it for later. You've left many important things for later, and you know that later almost never comes. Stay until the end because I need to lead you step by step into something concrete. I don't want this to be just a beautiful reflection. I want you to finish with clarity about what to do with the years you have left, because there is another deep reason why you're still alive. Your ending can still be better than your beginning. It doesn't matter how your first 30, 40, or 50 years were. What God wants to work in you now is not the amount of time, but the quality of your final chapter. You can still finish in peace, reconciled, useful, with purpose. You can still see things you never imagined. You can still become an answer for others. And so, in the next minutes, we're going to walk through several keys together. As you hear them, I want you to look inside yourself. When something hits your heart, when a phrase makes you uncomfortable or gives you hope, don't push it away. It's very likely that right there is the reason God has not allowed your story to end yet. The first key is this. You are alive because there is someone still tied to your name. Someone whose story is connected to yours, even if they don't know it. It may be that rebellious grandchild, that distant child, that lonely neighbor, that person who always greets you without knowing why they trust you. It may be someone you haven't even met yet, but there are lives designed to cross with yours in this final stage. And God is counting on you for that. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to speak perfectly. You just need to be available, to listen, to embrace, to ask how they're really doing, to say that phrase no one else takes the time to say. Your presence at this age can be a shelter in a noisy world that no longer knows how to listen. That is why God hasn't turned your light off yet. Because fragile souls need a calm voice, someone who is no longer competing, someone who understands that life is more than running after things. The second key, you are alive because your heart can still be healed. There are wounds you've carried for years, words your parents said, abandonments you suffered in silence, injustices no one ever fixed, emptiness you tried to fill however you could. You thought you would die with all that inside, without order, without relief. But by keeping you alive, God is telling you, there is still time for you to rest on the inside. Maybe the memories won't all change. Maybe the person who left will not return. But you can stop carrying guilt that isn't yours and hatred that breaks you from within. You are still here because God wants you to know true peace before you close your eyes. Not that you leave bitter, hurt, confused, but in peace. And here I want to pause with you, not to end, but to go deeper. If any of these words has touched something you didn't want to face, stay. Don't run from this discomfort. What hurts as you hear this may be exactly what God wants to heal. The third key, you are alive because your experience can still become direction for others. Think about how many mistakes you made because you lacked guidance. Decisions made out of ignorance, impulse, pressure. Now you can be the voice you yourself needed when you were younger. That voice that would have kept you from so many falls. And that voice can come from you today. There are young people making decisions with eternal impact without thinking, breaking families without understanding the cost, giving their minds to anything they see on a screen. You can watch that with pain, or you can understand that part of the reason you're still here is to be a sign in the chaos, not with shouting, not with condemnation, but with firm love, with the authority of someone who knows what is lost when we don't listen. The fourth key, you are alive because God has given you this final stage to put your house and your soul in order. I'm not just talking about documents, inheritances, legal matters. I'm talking about what is eternal, what you plant in the minds and hearts of those you love. Maybe you turned your life into work and forgot to look them in the eyes. Maybe you confused providing with being present. Maybe you grew cold. This season is a direct invitation. It is time to put in order what truly matters. There are words your children, grandchildren, and loved ones still need to hear from you before you go. I was wrong. It hurts me that this happened. I'm proud of you. I love you. I forgive you. Please forgive me. You are alive because those words can still be spoken. And when you speak them, you will feel a weight break. God has not kept you here for you to die with all of that locked inside. The fifth key, you are alive because there are fruits that only grow in this season. For many years you were pushed to produce, to run, to wake up early, to be everywhere. Now it feels like you can't keep up. But listen carefully. There are fruits that only appear in old trees. Patience, gentleness, understanding, proven faith. Wisdom with no need to show off. Love without hidden interests. The world doesn't value this, but heaven does. There are people who need that kind of fruit. They need to see you react with calm where others explode. To see that in spite of pain you remain thankful. To see that someone can be over 60 and still shine. Without becoming cynical, without surrendering to hatred. You are alive because God wants to show through you that time does not turn off the light of those who choose to stay close to Him. Now I want to talk about something uncomfortable for some, but necessary. There were moments when you thought it would have been better to leave with that loved one who passed. You felt your story was left hanging, the table too big, the bed too cold. In that emptiness, you asked yourself, why am I still here? Maybe you even thought about ending your life. Even if no one knows, if that ever crossed your mind, I need you to hear these words as if they were only for you. You are alive because God did not abandon you in your darkness. Because even when you considered giving up, He decided not to let go of your life. You are not breathing by inertia. You are breathing by decision. And that means your pain is not the only thing left in your story. There are still chapters to be written that are not filled with loss, but with purpose. Here comes a very specific invitation. If anything you're hearing describes how you feel, acknowledge it. Don't deny it anymore. When this message ends, take a piece of paper and write at least one reason why you believe you are still here. Maybe at first only one word comes out. That's okay. That is the beginning of an honest conversation with God about your purpose in this stage. There is another dimension many overlook. You are alive because you are part of a protection others don't even know they have. The simple existence of certain people in a family stops things that never end up happening. There are homes that don't completely collapse because there is someone praying in secret. There are accidents that never occur, decisions that never go through, destructions that are stopped because there is a hidden voice saying, "Take care of them." Maybe you have been that voice. Maybe you didn't know, but every time you worried, every time you talked with God about your loved ones, you were lifting an invisible shield. You are still here because that shield is still needed. And until others rise to continue that assignment, God is using you as a pillar. Now I want you to look at your life from another angle. Don't think only of what you suffered. Think of everything that never happened. The evil that brushed past you but didn't destroy you. The news that could have been worse. The nights you cried but morning still came. The times money seemed to run out but something appeared. The people who showed up right on time. The doors that opened when everything seemed closed. All of that shouts one truth. There was a hand moving things when you had no strength. And if that hand has held you past 60, it is not to now drop you without meaning. It is to show you clearly that you are still part of a story bigger than yourself. The question is, what will you do with this awareness? Here is the central point of this message. You are alive after 60, not only to remember, not only to survive, not only to wait. You are alive to respond, to ask God honestly, what do you want me to do with the days I have left? Not as a cliche, but as a real decision. Maybe the answer won't come as an audible voice. Maybe it won't be something spectacular, but it will come as an inner conviction, as names that come to mind, as simple, clear steps. Call someone. Speak again with that person. Pick up that dream you dropped. Get involved with that life that is more broken than it looks. Use your time for more than just watching the hours pass. Your purpose in this season is not to imitate the speed of the young, but to live the depth that only comes with years. Now, before we close this message, I want to speak to those who feel guilty. Those who say, I didn't do enough. I hurt my loved ones. I wasted years. I don't deserve another chance. Hear this with all your heart. If God was finished with you, you would not be here. If you are still breathing, you can still ask for forgiveness. You can still correct. You can still sow something different. You cannot change everything you did, but you can decide how you will live what remains. You can stay locked in who you were, or you can allow these years to become the years of greatest honesty and greatest love in your entire life. And that, in God's eyes, carries enormous weight. That is why you are here. That is why this message has reached you. Because this is not just to tell you, cheer up, you are important, but to remind you that you are in a strategic spiritual position. At your age, you no longer need to impress anyone. That makes you free. Free to be real, to love without masks, to speak truth, to embrace without pride. Imagine this were one of your last years. Not to scare you, but to awaken your focus. If you knew your days were numbered, what conversations would you have? Whom would you forgive? Whom would you hug more? To whom would you finally say what they meant in your life? With whom would you stop fighting over things that don't matter at all? Exactly that can be part of your mission now. You are alive to lighten burdens, not to stack more. You are alive to heal memories, not to open new wounds. You are alive to bring hearts closer, not to get up every day to argue over meaningless details. This season can be the deepest one if you choose to live it with intention. You are not just a spectator of the modern world. You carry something many have lost, depth. There is something else. You are alive because someone is still waiting for you to reach out a hand. You don't know who's about to give up near you. It might be someone much younger, someone who smiles but is empty inside. You know that emptiness. You've wrestled with long nights. You know what it feels like when nothing makes sense. You're still here because you can recognize that pain in others and approach without masks. A coffee, a call, a visit, a sincere question like, how are you really? That might be part of your assignment there. Are people who will survive because you are still here. That's why God has not taken you out of the way. Do not underestimate the power of your presence in someone's life, even if they don't applaud you, even if they don't say it, even if you feel they've pushed you aside. Heaven sees what you don't see. Now we are coming to a truth that can summarize all of this in one line. You are alive after 60 because God wants you to understand this is not the sad epilogue of your story, but the final assignment where everything comes together. This is the moment where you look back. Recognize the hand that held you in every fall. Recognize your mistakes. Recognize the grace and decide to use it all, the good and the bad, to bless others and draw closer to Him. You were not preserved to spend your days lamenting what you can no longer do. You were preserved to discover what only you can do now. Maybe you say, but I don't know where to start. Start with something simple, but real. Talk to God in your own words. Say, if I'm still here, it's because you still have a purpose for me. Show me who I must love better, what I must set in order, what I must say, what I must let go. I don't want to waste what I have left. That sincere prayer opens inner doors that may have been closed for decades. Write 3 names. People you feel love, burden, or concern for. Those names are not random. Pray for them. Look for a way to get closer. Maybe one of those names is the direct reason why you are still here. Make a short list of what you can still do with what you have. Listen, advise, prepare something for someone in need, care, visit a company. Do not underestimate these things. In God's eyes, their value is immeasurable. Decide what to let go, which complaint, which resentment, which repeated argument with no meaning. Every day you stay trapped in the same thing is one less day for what you could be building. You are alive to drop chains, not to feed them. Ask yourself what legacy you want to leave, written, recorded, told. Maybe it's time to write your story. Not to glorify yourself, but so others can learn. Maybe it's time to record messages for your grandchildren, your children, people who have never truly heard everything you carry inside. Those messages can keep speaking when you're no longer here. As you hear this, understand something. God saw what you gave without recognition. He saw what you kept quiet to avoid hurting others. He saw the sacrifices you made out of love. He saw every tear no one else knew about. And He has not left you here to forget you in a corner, but to honor those seeds in ways you may not yet imagine. Don't close this message like any other. Take it as a personal call, because that's what it is. Maybe for years you heard messages and always felt they were for someone else. This one is for you. You are still here because God still wants to use your voice. You are still here because God still wants to heal your wounds. You are still here because God still wants to show through your life that it is never too late to find meaning. You are still here because God still believes that with what you have left, He can do something eternal. Imagine a final scene. Not a scene of fear, but of clarity. Imagine that day comes when your strength is gone. Your hands tremble, your eyes close, your breathing slows. In that moment, how would you like to feel inside? Empty, with the sense that you only existed? Or at peace, knowing you used your last years to love better, to reconcile, to plant something, to respond to the reason God kept you here? What you do from today until that day is exactly what this message is trying to awaken. You cannot change the beginning of your story, but you can decide the tone of your last chapter, and that last chapter begins now. If you've made it this far, this is no longer a coincidence. You have heard every word, because God wanted to remind you that you are not a lost survivor, but someone still on this earth with a precise intention. Now it's your turn to decide what you'll do with this reminder. If inside you there is something saying, I need to take this seriously, make it visible. When this video ends, write something simple but real in the comments. I accept that God still has a purpose for me. It's not a magic phrase. It's a declaration. It's drawing a line between before and after. Do it also for the one who will read it and feel encouraged knowing they are not the only one who feels this way. Without knowing it, you can become a sign for other people over 60 who think they no longer matter. Share this with someone your age or older, with that friend who feels alone, with that family member who thinks they're in the way. Maybe that will be one of your first steps of obedience to this call, reminding another person that if they are still breathing, it's because God still has a plan for their life. Engrave this truth in your heart. You are not alive by accident. You are not alive only because you resisted. You are not alive only because of medicine, luck, or genetics. You are alive because an eternal mind decided to sustain your life until today. Because there is still purpose, still people to reach, still words to speak, forgiveness to give, wounds to heal, examples to set, prayers to lift, steps to take. You are alive because heaven still counts you in, and until God decides your mission is complete, no diagnosis, no statistic, no human opinion can define your final word. Lift your eyes. Take a deep breath. As long as you can inhale and exhale, you still have time to align yourself with the reason God kept you alive after 60. Start today. Make a call. Send a message. Forgive. Ask for forgiveness. Hug. Give thanks. Talk with God. Listen to the one nobody listens to. Bless someone who can't give you anything back. Share hope with the one who only sees darkness. That is how you turn your years after 60 into the fulfillment of the purpose for which God decided to keep you alive. And when the day of your departure comes, it will not be an accident. It will be an exact appointment. Until then, live every day with the certainty that you are here for a sacred reason. If this message has touched your life, share it with someone over 60 who needs it. And stay close, because this space exists to remind you of something many have forgotten. You are not alone. You are not invisible. You are still in the plan. If you are alive after 60, it is because God is still counting on you.